to episode 15 of Safe Haven, the unsolved murder of Judith Petty. We want to take a moment and welcome all our new listeners to the podcast and the Facebook group. Safe Haven is now at 1,500 members. Keep sharing the page and podcast to keep the movement going. If you have not listened to our previous episodes, please make sure to go back and take a listen. Also, a big welcome back to our crew who have been with us from the start. So we wanted to record an episode. Boy, do we have a lot of updates to share with all of you since the last time we released an episode. I have Jen and Alan are joining me tonight to discuss these huge movements in the case. Justin was not able to join us tonight, but we wanted to get this episode out as soon as possible. So we decided to just go ahead and sit down and talk about all the new movements and information and leads that we have gotten probably over the last month. So first of all, how are you both doing since the last time we talked?
I'm doing pretty good. I just got home from work, so I'm trying to shift my brain gears a little bit, but I'm doing well. And we finally got some good weather here in Colorado, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's like sweltering hot down here. It feels like I'm in Panama or something, but it's good.
Well, good. I know Alan and I were just together this past weekend and more to come on that. It was the first time I got to meet him. So he's very tall. He's taller in person than I anticipated. But he's probably like, well, you're smaller than I anticipated. You're shorter. So anyways, we wanted to go ahead and just dive into this episode. And so, back in June, we had posted on our Facebook page that we were going to be coming back to Parkersburg, that we were wanting to come back and do some more investigation, particularly around the cellar area. Alan had never been to Parkersburg or seen the property out there. So we wanted him to go out there and be able to see the cellar firsthand and get his investigative skills to, put his investigative skills to use and kind of really get a good idea of what he thinks happened. So while we were waiting to do that, part of what crowdsourcing is and what this podcast and our Facebook group is people are sharing information, they're reaching out to us. And, halfway, I would say at the end of May, beginning of June, I was, making all these phone calls that I make, just trying to connect with people who lived in Parkersburg. And I came across a source who, basically just flat out told me that he was told, who killed Judy, what happened, burned her in the cellar to get rid of evidence. And I almost fell off my couch when this information came through, because in 15 years, no one has ever said, this is who killed Judy. And to finally hear somebody put a name to that and say, this is what happened, this is who killed Judy, and this is how they burned her body. And, I know I reached out to all of you at that point going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm hearing this. Mm-hmm. And one of the things was, how credible is this? Okay, we have this information, but there was enough there that only that the killer would have known, or killers would be, have information on, that it made sense. And so, we decided as a team, you know what, we need to do more investigation before we go to Parkersburg. We wanted to make sure we dived into more information about, the names that were given, and do our due diligence before we even showed up in town, because we want to have a good game plan. And we're all traveling from other states. And so we want to make sure that when we're there, we use, the time, max time possible. So, Alan and Jen, kind of what was your thoughts when I reached out to you and saying, oh my goodness, someone has a name and saying that they know who killed Judy?
I think I'm always a natural skeptic, but, and I think you kind of have to be in order to properly vet information. But, and I'll let Alan speak. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but once you told us the whole story, there was a couple details in there that really made my ears perk up. And I'm like, oh, those are details only the killer or somebody the killer confessed to would know.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same, pretty much the same thing I was going to say, except there was just things about the story that person told that I still am kind of out there on, but there's parts of it that for sure only people that know would tell. So,
yep.
Right. Yep. And so, we took that information and was really excited about it because, like we said, there's never been a name. There's always been this story or this rumor or this thought of, Chris Cutright or all these other people that names have been brought into the case, but nobody had ever specifically said, this is who killed Judy.
Yeah.
So we decided to get back here on the episode and talk about the two names specifically that have been brought up as having, a part or, leads into the Judy Petty case. And so the first person we wanted to talk about, his name is Mitchell Wright, and he was 24 years old in 2008. His name got brought into this case because our source had mentioned that, I know many people know this name from our listeners and people who lived in Parkersburg. Billy Schreckenglass was Mitchell Wright's uncle. So we heard from a source that Billy had told somebody that Mitchell had killed Judy and that Mitchell's uncles covered up the crime, that they threw her into the cellar and set her on fire. So it looks like, there was like 3 or 4 people involved in this crime. And some of the details that Billy provided this person really made us question, okay, there's some validity or there's some truth to this. He knew some things that would make sense and other things were kind of like, no, that doesn't, fit with what we know. One of the unfortunate parts of this case is Mitchell is dead. He died of an overdose January 21st in 2017 from heroin. So, unfortunately, Mitch is not here to, for us to talk to be able to, find out more about why his uncle would say he killed Judy. So when we were in town, we did stop by his family and want to give them the opportunity to talk, and more to come on that next episode. But, what we found out was that Mitch actually was addicted to pills in 2008.
From what we understand, and when we were there in Parkersburg, we talked to several people that told basically the same story, that he had a pretty bad car wreck. I don't remember what year it was. Do you? It was before 2008, but I don't remember exactly what day it was.
It was 2006. Yeah.
He had a real bad car wreck, and they had to pin part of his hips and pelvis together and stuff. So, and he'd kind of gotten addicted to pain pills about that time. And, just over a period of time, he just kind of graduated from one to the other till he ended up on heroin. And then, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on this, but then there was, he graduated to heroin, like I said, and then kind of got to dabbling in meth as well. So, but, it just got really, really bad for him. And he just had a pretty good problem with it. And also he was, drinking a lot too. So he was getting around.
He was, what happened and what we've heard is that, he got into the car accident and was prescribed medications, of course.
Yeah.
And then those became, really, he was chewing pills, as they say, he was.
Well, he was taking pills. I mean, just handfuls at a time. And he was going from Percocets to Vicodin to just pretty much everything. And he just got to where he was needing those more and more and more and more. And he just couldn't get away from them. And I guess, the way it usually works with some of these folks, that the pain pills wasn't doing it. So he went to heroin.
And, after the pills, so he was addicted to the pills in 2008, which is where the timeline that we're focused on, right? I mean, Judy was murdered in 2008. So we really wanted to focus on 2008. And we found out through our research and our contacts that, Mitch was not, on meth or heroin in 2008. We do know that he was starting to do the shake and bake method for the meth in the woods, but that wasn't until 2010. So that's after Judy's death, because, one of the questions that we had was, is it possible that he was doing the shake and bake in the woods and, she came upon him? But, we wanted to, take a look at that. And it looks like that didn't start till 2010.
There was some people that we talked to that were there with him when he, his first experiment with shake and bake. And And he said for sure that it was in 2010 because there was something that happened that he remembered, or this person remembered where and when and everything. So, but we've pretty well solidified the fact that he wasn't doing anything like that until 2010.
Right. And one of the things, we did find out was, to obviously support your drug habit of pills and other things like that, Mitch would drive around at night, during the day, and he would be scouting places for things to steal off people's property. So that's how he afforded his pills and other things like that. Is he was actually known as a thief, that he could not be trusted. Even through high school, he started it. He was part of, even if he saw something during the day that he wanted, he would go back at night. And I think we were told one time he stole a bunch of, was it ATVs or something during the day?
Yeah, him and several other guys had got into a police chase and something, and ended up, they stole, I forgot how many they said, but it was several in one big trailer load that they stole, and I mean they got in trouble for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and can I chime in for 1 second? Because I know there's going to be listeners that are like, oh my gosh, this is slander or libel or defamation. No, it's not. I just want to clarify that this team this is not just single source reporting, is what we would call it in the Army, which is not very reliable. This is information that's been vetted and confirmed by multiple people in the local area. And we're not, Mitch may have had nothing to do with Judy's death, but this is what the team has been told by more than one person, and we're going to put it out there because if he was involved, there's probably more people that know, and they can help us close this case. Also, and not being rude, but you legally cannot defame the dead. So I just wanted to make those legal boundaries clear, and that you guys aren't engaging in that, because I'm sure there's going to be a couple people that are going to cry foul. But this is, part of an investigation. You have vetted, like you guys just said, you talked to Doug about all this ahead of time. He's confirmed some of the criminal activity, which makes the sources more reliable. So I just wanted to be clear on that we're not out to talk poorly of somebody for no good reason.
Thank you, Jen. I guess we should have said that at the beginning.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. I'm glad you threw that in there. But yeah, so, we are not interested. We're not saying Mitch had anything to do with this. We're just going off what somebody had told somebody else. And then based on that, we're like, well, we need to look into it. And that's what this all is. We're not saying he did or did not. We're just saying this is what we are told. And we are bringing that to you all. And that's, what Jen was saying is, we're not looking to defame, Mitchell at all.
Well, and if there's anybody out there that can bring evidence to the contrary, we would like that too. So if anybody has evidence that supports this account or refutes it, please, either way, we want to know.
Well, and what a lot of people out there need to understand is the investigation process. And when we get these tips, we've got to look into them both ways, whether they, and either vet what we've heard or debunk what we've heard, to where, we've got to either look at it and see if it's true or see if it's not true.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what we're doing. I mean, we're not, like you said, we're not saying Mitch or this other name had anything to do with it. We're saying that we've got to check into it because some of the stuff we've heard was pretty credible. Yeah. That only people, would know that were actually there. So
yeah.
Now what we're doing is we're going in and vetting these statements because what we were told made a lot of sense and was pretty credible because some of the details, only people that were there would know some of these details.
Right. I totally agree.
And that's where we're going with this. We're not doing it to defame anybody or whatever.
So there's more, right, Melissa? Like there's some other details that were told to you guys.
Yeah. And, as we were digging into Mitch and, his life at that time, we were told that he had a significant behavior change in 2008 that actually resulted in a divorce from his first wife. And so, when you look at profiling, when you look at red flags, for me, that was a significant flag that I needed to look at, because when somebody commits a crime, oftentimes they will have significant behavior changes. Their drugs will increase, their behavior changes, their personality changes. And we were told by a few people that they can remember in 2008, that's when Mitch was no longer Mitch, that he definitely had significant changes in his personality, but also his drug use changed after 2008. And so you wonder if there's a correlation between Judy's murder and these changes in Mitch, for sure.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The other thing that we had to consider is, when we look at means, motive, and opportunity. And I know, Jen, you did an amazing episode with us kind of going over, different means, motive, and opportunity. So when we look at the means for Mitch, he was related to Billy Schreckengoss, of course. And, Billy was his uncle. And Billy lived right there near the Petty property. So we're talking 0.5 miles through the trails, the woods. So Billy lived right there, and Mitch was obviously related to Billy and knew Billy, would hang out with Billy. So he's also, I'm guessing, familiar with the woods and the properties there on Deer Walk Highway because his family lived out there. So Mitchell's mom is Kim Wright. She was a Schreckengoss, and then she married Bob Wright. So Mitchell's mom, Kim, and Billy are brother and sister. So we had to sort all this out, didn't we? There were so many names and
oh my gosh,
it's all intertwined and intertwined.
It is.
It's incredible.
So when you talk about means, he was familiar with the property. His family lived out on Deer Walk Highway. The fact that Mitch would drive around during the day and then go back at night and steal stuff, yeah, he would have the means, if that makes sense. Jen, do you have anything, or Ellen, on the means part?
Well, the only thing that on the means that kind of kept throwing me backwards on it was while we were up there and talking to these folks, a bunch of them just kept talking about how Mitch wasn't really overly aggressive. He would back down from fights and stuff like that. And so that kind of led me back on that. But as far as knowing the property and having, access to it, I think he very much did. So.
I would agree.
I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is we heard over and over again that Mitch, when you talk about, ruling someone in or out, you take it all together.
Right.
You look at everything. And, over and over again, we heard, no way, Mitch did not go for a fight. He was not a violent person, no history of abuse.
Yeah, there was several people.
He would back away.
Several people told us that he would back down from fights, and even he got, beat up on a couple of times. And it just didn't, I don't know, it just doesn't sound like somebody that would be homicidal, unless, they get what's called liquid courage sometimes from alcohol and drugs and stuff. So, that change happened in 2008. So, I don't know, that could be it. But, there was several people told us that, no, there's no way Mitch would do that. He just, it's not his personality. So.
Well, I'll chime in about that because most people who get convicted of murder, their family members always say the same thing. Right. I can't believe it. He wouldn't hurt a fly. And you said liquid courage is one thing, but here's another thing. If you factor in that the person is looking at possibly losing their livelihood or their freedom, meaning someone caught them in the act of doing something criminal and now they're scared they're going to go to jail or prison.
That's true. That's very true.
That can absolutely play into the motive, which is going to be the next part. So I always take family members' accounts of people with a huge grain of salt because no one ever wants to believe that their person or loved one is capable of injuring somebody else.
That's 100% true.
Yeah. And on the means, just to clarify, means refers to a person having the capability to carry out the crime. So like in Judy's case, if we had, say, a paraplegic that lived next door and was wheelchair bound, they do not have the means to get up her driveway or get into her yard and take control of her and kill her, right? So that's what we mean when we talk about somebody having the means to carry out a crime. It means they have the capability and the knowledge that they need.
And so what do you think about Mitch for the means, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, he lived in close proximity and, like you said, had other family members with property that basically bordered the Petty farm. I almost guarantee that everyone that lived in that local area knew the Petty farm was uninhabited, and that would be knowledge the killer probably needed. If they thought a whole family was living there, they probably wouldn't have trespassed onto the property. And again, had the capability to get onto the property at night and probably not up the driveway. So that would mean the killer probably needed to know those back trails or whatever the access is from the backside of the property that you can take where you're not on the road, you don't need to be in a vehicle, but you can still get to the house.
And then, when we take a look at motive, what is the motive here? And I think we've all struggled with, I don't know if we'll ever really know the motive.
Right.
Because it's such an odd circumstance of how this all kind of happened. But, a motive would be maybe, Judy walked upon Mitch, who was stealing things off the property, and he was high on pills that he killed her. Maybe he was hallucinating or panic or just really, not in the right mind, that he thought something was, she was there for another reason. And then once you kind of, you kill somebody, then you got to cover it up. And if you panic, do you go ahead and then, involve other people because you're so hallucinating and not with it?
Alan, you can probably speak to motive better in terms of the arson aspect.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the motive for that would be, definitely killing her for sure, because we know from the toxicology reports and everything that she was definitely dead prior to the fire starting. So in my personal opinion, for what that's worth, I think that would be the motive for starting that fire. It wasn't just to get warm. It wasn't to, whatever. It was to get rid of that evidence. And, and we talked about when we talked to Mr. Petty and the family the other day, they were talking, one of them asked me about that very same thing about, what my opinion was for them starting the fire. And I told them, I said, to get rid of the evidence. And I said, it sounds bad, but that body is physical evidence. And that's what they're trying to do, is burn it up.
Yeah.
And this one is, I've told you guys several times, this is the worst one that I've ever seen as far as almost total cremation. Whoever done this got really, really lucky with that, because, anything that might have been on that body is gone. So now we've got to look for other things. So.
Yeah, we can't even determine the cause of death or how she was killed.
Right.
And that may be the motive right there.
Could be.
Yeah. You basically alluded to that, but they may have, I'm just putting out a hypothetical, but they could have shot her.
Yeah.
The bullet didn't exit her.
Yeah.
And now, they're like, oh my gosh. Well, I don't know if they're that forensically aware, but they could be thinking, oh my gosh, now they can recover that bullet. They'll know what caliber it is.
Right.
That's going to point to me something.
And two, you talk about, shooting her. The only place that they checked for bullet smear and all that stuff was in the skull fragments. And, you can shoot somebody in the thoracic cavity and kill them in the back or whatever. And, so, and none of those pieces really were there for them to check. So,
exactly,
this is and I hate to call it this, but it's almost a perfect storm for this.
Yeah. I think my top.
No, and I was going to have you explain, we kind of talked about, an organized and an unorganized killing. And for this kind of situation where hypothetically, if we look at it, which is what we have to do and which is what we're doing, let's say Mitch was up there, he was hallucinating, he was on, pills, he was paranoid, he kills her, then what? If you're in a straight panic hallucination, do you know then, or are you then in the mindset of, I've got to now cover this up? Or do you run? Do you have that foresight that just, is it foresight? I'm trying to say.
Can be, yeah.
Probably not the right word. What is it?
No, that's an appropriate word, I think. To be able to think ahead through your next steps and what makes sense.
I don't think any of it was really planned out. I don't think they sat there and thought 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. I know she's going to be there. No. This was a spur of the moment.
Yep.
I've got to do this. Oh crap. Now I got to do this. and now I've got to run, and now I've got to keep my mouth shut for however many years.
Right.
She became a victim of opportunity, but this, in my mind, is no way somebody who looked, because so there are serial arsonists and killers that look for victims of opportunity, right? They don't stalk their victims. This is not that, because we would see similar crimes in the surrounding counties or this county. So she unfortunately was a victim of opportunity. Like you said, Alan, there's no way the killer knew she was going to be up at the house that night. So there's something else.
Nobody did, not even her family. Nobody. I mean,
exactly.
This was totally out of character for her to go up there, and she'd never done it before. And it just happened like it did. Like I said, that was just the ingredients for a perfect storm to happen at the very end. And and now we've got to wait through it and figure out what happened.
I would say this person is on the organized versus disorganized scale. They're definitely going to be on the disorganized end of the spectrum. Probably not 100% because they got away with it. I can almost guarantee some kind of altercation happened, and that could still be her getting hit by a car, but something happened that wasn't planned, and it escalated, or she, like I said, she threatened the person's freedom or livelihood, or came across them committing a criminal activity, something like that. And they probably killed her in a snap reaction and then panicked and thought, as you already explained, like, well, let's light a fire to destroy the evidence. And unfortunately, they just got super lucky with the location of the fire.
Yeah.
Right.
Where they done it at, in that cellar, I mean, that was, I don't know. I mean, and everything falling in on top of her, it was, I sent you guys a picture of, when we were up there in Parkersburg and I was going through there, we found glass that was literally melted. It had literally liquefied during that fire and had stuff encapsulated inside of it. And when I got back and got to be able to do some research on it, glass does that at 2,600 degrees.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So that's hot, and it sustained that for a long enough period of time to totally destroy almost all of her body and then calcify the rest of the bones to the point that they were super fragile. It's just, like I said, they got lucky. I mean, everything worked out in their favor, sadly, and not in Judy's.
Yeah, I know.
So, when we look at opportunity, Mitch definitely had access to ATVs, and that's kind of what we heard and how they would get around it, night, and just kind of your country boys, and if you're stealing stuff, access to the trails, you use your ATVs. And, one of the big things is, so how do we, rule Mitch out as Judy's killer? And, I don't think that we can ever rule anybody out until we can get 100% confirmation that, this person's killed Judy. But we can look at everything that we have gathered so far. And I would, move Mitch further down, the list in regards to actually being Judy's killer. When we take a look at his means, motive, and opportunity, and his wanting to run from fights and, not really being the aggressor. He wasn't making meth back then. He was on pills. And, I kind of look at it all and it just doesn't fit. Like, how would we'd have to put him there. And that just means he has to be up there visiting his uncle or, somehow just be on the property. And I think when we look at it, that's less likely for me.
Yeah,
what do you?
Yeah,
I agree totally.
Well, yeah. And if he's driving around during the day looking for properties of opportunity to steal from, the Petties is not one, because you can't see.
You can't even get
past the first 15 feet of the driveway.
Right, you can't even get close to seeing the house.
Yeah,
unless you walk into the house.
He's not. I don't think he would pick it from that standpoint, but I think he could have been, at his uncle's, I suppose, that night. Maybe they went off into the woods together to do whatever. We're going to talk about Billy in a minute. But it's hard for me to come up with a scenario where Mitch would be the sole perpetrator of this crime.
I agree.
I agree, too.
Then we go into the next person of interest. Again, not saying Billy didn't do it, but based on, information that we've heard, as we started digging more into Billy, his red flags, I'm kind of overwhelmed by the number of things that we have found out on Billy, and we'll talk about his means and motive and opportunity, but a couple of things to know about Billy. So Billy Struckengoss, back in 2014, he had told somebody, just kind of out of the blue. So we're talking, what is that? 7 years from when Judy was killed?
6. Yeah.
6?
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm a social worker, not a mathematician.
Yeah. No one's going to blame you for math skills.
6 years. Okay. 6 years passed. And all of a sudden, Billy just kind of blurts out to somebody, hey, Mitchell killed Judy and his uncles covered it up by burning her in the cellar. And, his uncles would be the Wrights. So the Wright family lives out there. So there's Bob Wright, John Wright, Lon Wright, and he names them and says basically that, Judy knew too much information, that, Mitch killed her, that she was out at the bar, showed up with some people, and then they left and brought her to the property, and then they, killed her. And, that's where we started looking and going, okay, there's some more information we're not releasing that was told at this point that, was kind of interesting for what we know about the crime. And out of the blue, for someone just to say that was rather interesting. And this person actually asked Billy point blank, did you kill her? Were you involved? And he didn't deny it, nor did he say yes. So to me, not saying anything is, I would say that, to know the information he had to be there or he had to do it.
Right.
So when we took a look at Billy and everything else, now, unfortunately, we have another person of interest who's dead. Billy committed suicide actually a year later. So after he shared this information with with the source in 2014, he actually committed suicide in January. So he died January 24th from a gunshot to the head. So he is no longer, again, around for us to be able to question, to be able to verify what he said. But given this person's information who told us this, we have enough to just keep talking with more people who are kind of saying some interesting things about Billy. Did either one of you had anything more about that before we get into the flags?
Yeah, I do. And some of the listeners out there may, say, well, they're dead. What are we going to do? What can we do about it now? We want, and we found out, we've got to close this case out regardless. And, we found out so different ways that, that we can do that. And that's what we're doing, so we're not trying to pin this on 2 people that are dead. We don't know that they did it. We're still, and what we're doing is trying to either say, find evidence that they did or evidence that they didn't. So,
and we're following the evidence that's been given to you, to you guys, not me, but you're following the evidence and where it leads. We're not snatching names out of the air and then trying to place them there. That's not how we operate.
Right.
And like you guys said, there's some more details that were given to you that we're not going to release at this time, stuff that, Doug's running down and whatnot, but they point in the direction of possibly one or both of these guys. And so we're hoping we can either corroborate some of this information or someone can come forward with, a good alibi for them or something, to where we can take them off the list. Yeah. Whatever. We don't care which way.
Well, like Melissa said, and we're fixing to get into them, but the red flags, it's hard to turn a blind eye to them for sure.
And I don't know if anyone, when we went on WTAP, when we were in town, as we said in the beginning, in 15 years, Mitch and Billy's name has not come up in this case as persons of interest. They were never talked to. They were never interviewed. And that blows my mind because as we get into the red flags, Billy lived, as I mentioned earlier, 0.5 miles from the Petty farm. So the Petty farm and the Schreckengoss farm back up to each other.
Yes. And
you can actually get from Billy's property to the Petty farm, through the woods and trails. And you can actually see the trails on Google earth. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah.
You can, they're like there. You can see them from 2008. It wasn't difficult.
Yeah. And you and I can attest. We walked part of them while we were up there the other day, and you can see the trails even on the ground, from, part of the way. And it's super easy to get across there. I shouldn't say super easy because there's a lot of hills and valleys and stuff and ticks too, Melissa, isn't there? And
God, probably mosquitoes and
well, Alan, what's your count? How many ticks you get?
I don't remember. I lost count.
Oh,
but
I'm sorry.
Funny story.
It was so bad. Doug called me or texted me Monday night and was talking about how bad the ticks and chiggers were that he got, and he didn't get off in the weeds like we did. So,
oh gosh,
he had ticks.
He did. Said he did. Yeah.
He never told me. So what was funny is I don't have one, and I'm going to check myself again. But what was funny, I have to tell you this story. So of course I'm riding with Doug, and you're finding all these ticks on you in a different car. So now I'm like sitting with Doug in the car, and I'm like checking my arms in the back of my, like I'm looking for ticks, and Doug's like, "Stop it. You're making me nervous." I was like, "Well, Alan found 5. He's freaking me out." He's like, "Don't you know? Just because Alan freaks you out, you can't freak me out." And I'm checking, and it was so funny. I had none though. Knock on wood. So
gosh, lucky. Yeah,
they were horrible.
Yeah, Alan's like picking them off. Like
yeah.
Well,
guess what? In February of any year, there's no ticks or bugs or anything out there. So there's an advantage for whoever.
I'm going, but the next time I go back and snoop around up there, I'm going after the frost when the leaves are coming off, and it kills the ticks out.
Yeah. That was fun. But so again, as we look at this and we look at how close Billy lived to the Petty farm, very easy backwoods trails, and he knew them.
Yeah.
He was very familiar with them.
He lived up there all his life, and I mean,
for sure.
Yeah. And this next red flag is very, very huge for me. So we have heard, and we heard this way in the beginning about a year ago when we first started this investigation, but we weren't putting too much weight into it. We had other people we were looking at and really just wanting to get everything. But we had heard that Billy actually had a crush on Judy. So, we had been told that he had a crush on Judy and also Judy's sister, Cheryl. So, Billy knew the family. He knew Judy specifically. He knew the Petty family. So there's, you got close proximity to the scene, and you have somebody who's familiar with the family and the property.
And he must have known it was uninhabited, right?
Right. He would have known that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also too, Melissa, we might tell the listeners, Judy and Cheryl looked a lot alike. I mean, they really did.
Oh,
good point.
They look so much alike.
Good point.
Yes. Yes. Very much alike. And when we were, we'll probably talk more about it last time or our next episode when we were talking to the family. But, Billy had a crush on Judy and Cheryl. And when you first saw Cheryl, or I did, I kind of stopped in my tracks. Yeah. I mean, her and Judy are very similar.
Very similar.
Those two things are big enough for me of red flags. You're like, okay, so we've got location, knew the family. Now we also found out that through, again, just pure investigation, calling around, trying to talk to people, message people, all of this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of effort to track people down, and usually you get a lot of no's or wrong person before you actually get the right person.
You get doors shut in your face.
Yeah, that too. But, I was able to speak with, an individual who actually was abused by Billy. And I mean, sexually and physically. So, this person had shared her story with me and her abuse, and Billy was very, very violent. He had a violent streak in him. This person had said one of her family members encouraged her to leave Billy because she was afraid that Billy would kill her. And so, when we look at that again, now we're adding more flags here, right? That someone who is physically violent and has that capability, who basically this person said she was raped by
she was
Billy, and she was
straight up.
Right. And so, when you have that when someone's been raped and physically abused, that just heightens it for me, right? What do you guys think?
I agree.
Well, and can you explain why we believe this person's story so much? It's not, she didn't just call you up and say, yeah, you raped me, right? Like, can you explain the extent that she went to meet with you guys?
So this person was, involved in a relationship with Billy. And when I was able to find her, she actually went through the day that he raped her, how manipulative he was, how he was able to, she was very naive. She was a caregiver. She was 20 years younger?
Yeah.
Alan?
Yeah, that's what she's
20 years younger than Billy. So that's a predator in my head. I think he liked naive and preyed on people. And that Judy was naive.
Yeah, and she told you saying that she told us specifically that when she looked at Judy and looked at her personality and her profile and everything, she said, I'm almost a cookie cutter of her. So
yes.
I mean, and you did, and she was, when she explained herself to us about how she done things and how she done, what all she did and everything, she was almost just like Judy. She was young. She was still innocent. She was still, she was a caregiver. She just took care of people and put other people first in her life instead of, herself. And that's exactly the way Judy was. They were almost identical. So to me was one of the huge red flags that popped up right off the bat was where we're at. But then when she talked about the similarities between the two of them, it's unreal.
Yeah, well, and definitely. A lot of women will not talk to, I'm not even say a lot, I'm going to say a majority of women who have been sexually assaulted. They're not going to talk to two strangers that they'd never met and expose themselves to have to relive that traumatic event. But Exactly. She did that with you guys.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That's really important to consider too, in terms of, vetting her recollections and stuff. Most women would never.
No. And you could tell
to do that.
You could tell that her story wasn't made up. I mean, it was, there was, it was believable. Very believable.
There was way too much detail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. She went into a lot of detail, and from that too, even talking with me, it brings up a lot. And she's got goosebumps when she saw Judy's and listened and was not familiar. And she's like, I could see it being me. And that's what I was told was, you got to leave him. Yeah. And she has sought counseling all these years. And even after talking to me, it's bringing up all of this and her PTSD around the rape. And, she would be on the ground and he would be kicking the crap out of her, and she's protecting her face. I mean, just, kicking her anywhere he could find. And so that alone says volumes, in addition to everything else that, she had shared with us. Yeah. And it took a lot of courage. Like, she didn't come to us. Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, is these sources, they never came to us. I found them. So it's not like they were looking or wanting. Each person has said, well, now that you think of it, right? Here's this, but it never comes very easy. This isn't something that people want to often talk about, but they are talking.
Yes. How did the family know that he had a crush on Judy and Cheryl?
I think he made it known, he was always flirting with them. So, we talked about, him raping and physically abusing a girlfriend. The other thing that a red flag for Billy, is that he abused drugs and alcohol. He was a regular at the Sun Dance Bar there on Dallison that we've often talked about. So he would drink a lot, lots of Jack and Cokes. He was, I would say he was an alcoholic based on everything I've heard, but he was also using drugs. So there's different periods that we heard where he would be okay in the morning during the auction and then go into the bathroom, come out, and just be so high that he couldn't even function. Like, he would say, you got to run the auction, and he would leave. He just was not able to, conduct the auction because he was so high.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people had said, well, Billy was crazy. We hear that all the time. Billy's crazy. Billy's crazy. There's something wrong with him. He did LSD or tried to make LSD in college, and it messed him up. Right. And I do think that's true. There definitely is some mental health issues with Billy, but to know that he was often a regular at the Sundance Bar there on Dallison, that he was there almost nightly, and, he abused drugs and alcohol, I think that, again, is another risk for him.
So what you're saying is, by the time that the bar closed that night, which was early, right, because of this ring girl contest or whatever, say it closed, or when do you guys think it closed? 7, 8?
One of our sources said like 8 o'clock, 8:30.
Okay, so he's probably pretty plastered by then.
I'd say it's a good possibility. Well,
inebriated enough.
He's well on his way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we found out is Billy was there that night. We have source who says, yeah, Billy was there. And I would say Billy was there most nights, if not all.
Well, I would say
wasn't something like, once a month.
I would go as far as say he was there every night because he lived alone and he was a loner. And we talk about that too on down here, but he had nothing else to do but go down there,
Right.
So,
and he would often, he was very isolated himself, and because of his behavior as well. But, he would sit at the bar and just talk to himself, talk to people who weren't there, be waving his arms. We hear these stories of how he just, would be there and nobody paid any attention to him. Nobody wanted to talk to him, engage with him. He didn't have friends. He was later on just really somebody that nobody really wanted to interact with.
Well, I think he was, I think he was a lot of like, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of like fit the profile of some of these active shooters and stuff that people just thought, well, he's just off his rocker. We're not going to, not worry about him too much. But he just kind of maybe ended up doing something that was really, really, really bad.
That's a good analogy. I hadn't really thought of that, but I think you're right because, not to profile, but
no,
a lot of active shooters do fall into a similar category with each other, and that is kind of loners. They feel rejected from society or their peers. And it kind of sounds like he was in a similar situation, and maybe something just led him to snap.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we kind of talked that because we know that the bar closed early that night. We do think we've closed that gap in the timeline between when Judy got picked up by Chris Cartwright and dropped off. And that is based on another source that said, yeah, I went in and they were closing early to go to the ring girl competition. So we feel like that has all kind of lined up and makes sense to us at this point. And so we were kind of wondering, well, if you look at, opportunity, is it there for Billy?
Yes.
And I would say yes.
100%.
Billy walked around at night. That's the other thing a listener should know. He was often seen walking around at night. And given his location to the Petties, it's not, I would say, far-fetched to think that the bar closed early. He was not done drinking yet, or he wanted to get on his ATV, drink, and go riding in the woods and came upon Judy there. So I think that might have been that perfect storm that we've talked about with the fire, is that the circumstances lined up, unfortunately, in the wrong way. And, is that possible that he showed up and he knows Judy and Judy knows Billy? And again, Judy was always nice to him. She's not rude. She's naive. She's friendly. That's the Petty family. And so he could have taken that the wrong way or know, hey, she's by herself. Given that he has the capacity, to rape and physically abuse women. And
we've known that he's had a crush on her.
Right.
But we've also been told he could change his personality. Like he could actually be very charismatic and friendly. And maybe and again, we're just throwing theories out there, but maybe he came upon Judy and realized she was in some sort of, I don't want to say medical crisis, but like, knew something was wrong with her, maybe because she'd walked all those miles and low blood sugar, and he knew that the farm was uninhabited, so there's probably no food. Who knows? He could have run home and got food and water for her, playing the nice guy, but using it as a ruse to get in her good graces or get in that house.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important, Jen, that you mentioned that correlation between that and when the rape happened. Like, it was, let me help you. Here's food, here's water.
That's exactly what what she told us that he did, is he brought her, food and stuff. And
right. His previous victim, we'll just say. Yeah. Not Judy, but
she definitely is a victim.
She is, absolutely. Well, survivor. I prefer the word survivor.
Yes.
But yes. Yeah. He victimized her.
Yes. And he definitely had mental health issues. I'm not discounting that. I think, from his LSD use and then the drugs and the alcohol, he definitely had this kind of split personality. But what's so interesting about Billy is that everyone says he was crazy. He talked to himself. He was talking about aliens showing up in his backyard. But the second thing out of their mouth was he was extremely smart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Extremely intelligent. And that he could flip it on and off, where he could be talking to himself, waving his hands, talking. And if someone said, "Hey, Billy," he would snap out of it and he would be able to have a normal conversation. And so I wonder, did he play that up for his own kind of benefit, where people would be like, "Oh, he wouldn't do anything. He's crazy," And everyone in this case that we've talked to, even from the beginning, everyone thinks Billy did it because everyone thinks he walks at night. He's crazy. He lives right there. And we kind of were like, well, that's not enough, right? But now when we've actually investigated and looked at Billy, you find a whole hornet's nest of flags.
Yeah. Circumstantial, but there's a great analogy with regards to circumstantial evidence, which comes from the Cold Justice show for people that watch that. It's Kelly, right? Siegler. That's one of the hosts. Yeah, she's amazing. She made this awesome analogy once. She goes, so if you have one pencil in your hand, you can break it pretty easily, right? And that's the same with one piece of circumstantial evidence. But she goes, when you got a handful of pencils, you can't break them. And she's like, we have to look at cases like that too, because we don't always have, this solid DNA or fingerprints or forensic evidence. But if there's enough circumstantial pieces that line up and you can't refute them, then you have to follow those. You have to at least look at it.
Right. That's an awesome, like you said, an awesome analogy. I never thought about it that way, but that's awesome.
I hadn't either till I saw one of her episodes.
I love that show. I love that show. She's so great.
Yeah.
And what I love about that show is that most of the cases is all circumstantial. A lot of it, because they're so old, they're cold cases.
Yeah. They're the most, they're like the hardest of the hard. Yep.
Yeah. And that's what we're dealing with, Judy.
Yes. So at this point, we're not saying Billy did it, but we definitely can't rule him out, because, we went over means, motive, and opportunity with regards to Mitch, and we can go through it with Billy, but he had all three. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to consider that.
He had all three, and he had also had all three in several different ways. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
And the other thing for listeners to know is that, we know that Billy actually stole property from the Petty farm. So there was reports, in 2008 where Mr. Petty is saying, "Hey, I'm being stolen from by the Wrights and the Schreckengoss, and they're taking my stuff and all these things." And Mr. Petty recounts that, his sawmill was stolen from his property, and he found it over at Billy's.
Okay.
So what a big ladder, right?
Yeah,
Alan?
he stole.
How big
it was like a big extension ladder, and they found it at a salvage yard that had been chopped up in small pieces and stuff and sold as scrap metal. And
Jeez.
and here's one of the crazy things about this. We were talking to Mr. Petty the other day, and he was talking about all this, about the stealing that he had and all that. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, when did all the stealing stop? And they sat there for a little bit, and him and his wife and his daughters all talked, and all of them pretty much at the same time said, when Judy died. And then Melissa and I were talking too, and she said, well, there was nothing left to steal. And I said, Melissa, there was tons of stuff left to steal. I said, because if they were taking all this stuff and selling it at a scrap yard, look at the pictures and look at what's still laying up there. You've got old washers and dryers that were in the house and other pieces of, of scrap iron and metal and stuff. That's all that's up there. And it just suddenly stops. I said that was a perfect opportunity for them to steal. Mm-hmm. And it just stopped. And you could probably speak to the reason why it stopped, but a lot of times they don't go back to the crime scene, right?
That's actually very true. Yeah, that's in cases where a victim's body is moved, majority of the time, the body is moved to a location where the killer or killers or perpetrators never pass that area in their daily life or daily activities, because it's psychological, right? It's like if you kill a girl and dump her in a ditch, but you have to drive by that ditch every day, it's gonna mess with you mentally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it, that they don't want to return to the scene of the crime.
Yeah. Well, and another red flag for me, we go back to the very part of this, so first part of this, where we were talking about Billy. We know he committed suicide in 2015. Now that's 7 years after Judy died, a little over 6 years. That could have been something that weighed on his mind all those years. And then with the drugs and alcohol and everything that he was taking, that we know he was taking, and him, it just stewed till it finally boiled over, or he snapped, like you said earlier, and that might have been what caused him to kill himself. I don't know. I'm not saying that's what it was. I'm not saying that Billy did it, but exactly. Again, like we were saying, you've got to take all these bullet points and these red flags that we have and look at them all together and say, it's sure pointing in a certain direction.
Yeah. And I would say too, the one thing to know about Billy's suicide is, as I was sitting here the other day thinking, that's very close to the anniversary of Judy's death. He killed himself in January 24th, right? And she was February 6th.
Yeah, that's just a little over a week and a half, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know that, there was always lots of investigations or press, newspaper articles around Judy's death. And, I'm curious and looking at, was this a year in 2014 when it picked up again? The family's been advocating for, 15 years, and they always are trying, getting people to help them. So was 2014 a year where he felt the pressure of just no one talked to him or interviewed him, but just the conversation and have it brought up again, have it being on the news, have it being in the paper, just a reminder of what happened and what he did. Was that the trigger, and he was done?
Yeah, but who knows if some reporter wasn't poking around for a story 2 weeks prior, to the anniversary, and came across Billy and said something that triggered him.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Or even asked for an interview, because he's essentially a neighbor, Yeah. So there could have been a reporter that was running up and down Deer Walk Highway to those neighboring properties trying to interview the neighbors. Who knows? I mean, it could be something as little as that.
So, we kind of talked about him being extremely smart and his personality changes. And, one of the things that, we heard was from a source, somebody was like, what, I would tell people, you don't want to mess with him because he's crazy as shit, but he's smart enough to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we talked to some other sources, and talked to the survivor that he raped and abused, she said, he's super smart. He knows how to cover his ass. He knows how to be manipulative. He knows how to play up his kind of crazy, but that he very much would, she has no doubt that he would not have killed Judy.
Wow.
And not felt bad about it at all.
That's pretty powerful.
So, yeah. The other thing to know about Billy, and Jen, I'm curious to hear what you have to say on this, is we've heard that he had really, really bad personal hygiene. He did not take care of himself. He would not shower or bathe for God knows how long. A couple of people said, you could smell him coming a block and a half away, just really bad personal hygiene. That's partly why he probably was isolated. But is there a profile for that in regards to hygiene? I thought that there was, that fits into somebody like Billy.
bad personal hygiene can go along with certain types of mental illness. And again, I'm not stereotyping. It's just a fact where it is not a priority to some people. It honestly, he may have enjoyed being a loner. Some people just do. Not bathing is one way to keep people away from you. So it could have actually been a subconscious way to continue being a loner, being to himself, doing what he wants to do. Nobody's going to bother him. No one's paying attention to him. He might have enjoyed a little bit of that aspect. I don't know. But it is hard to, go to a bar if you smell that bad or show up at someone's door and try to get in their door. But I don't know enough about that habit of his, I guess. But it's interesting that more than one person has pointed it out. There's probably some validity to it.
Oh yeah, for sure. We've heard that quite a bit. And the other thing to know is that Billy, obviously, I don't know who doesn't out there, West Virginia, but he had a gun. He had access to guns. He'd have sometimes a gun on him or in his truck or in his house. So, as we mentioned earlier, is it possible that she was shot? We didn't, and we weren't able to get that, and so that's kind of like all of our red flags. I mean, we kind of summarized it all for you all. But, when we wrote it out, the list is really long with these circumstantial things that we're hearing. So, I want to ask anybody out there listening, if you know Billy, if you know Mitch, if you know the Wright family, the Schreckengoss family, if you know anything that, could help us, please reach out to us. You can remain anonymous. Again, it doesn't have to be something that 100%, right? Or you might think it's a little, or, actually things to refute what we just said, actually, no, that's not what I know or of this person. We take all of that into consideration because we're not, again, saying that these two individuals were involved, but we're saying that, based on everything we've heard in the flags, it's very possible that one of them are. We have to look at it. We have to. But like you just said, we're not looking to prove this theory. It's actually better to disprove it and be able to alibi somebody and remove them from the list. That actually makes the job easier.
Yes. That's
so in either direction, whatever information you may have that points in either direction, innocence or guilt, we don't care. Bring it to us.
Yeah, if you've got
obviously we don't.
What I was going to say is if you've got proof that puts Billy somewhere else that night, if he was shopping with you or whatever, let us know.
Yes,
because
please.
we can take this and we can say, okay, it wasn't. We can take it and do away with it. We can start focusing somewhere else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so I just kind of want to end the episode. I wanted to say all that just so that with the red flags that please come forward if you've heard things, know things. And again, we're not looking for you to be 100% accurate or know for sure. That's our job. Send me even the rumors because there's always some truth in rumors and I track it down. I'm like, I'm the dog with the bone. Give it to me and then I'll figure it out, So we wanted to say that, but let's just kind of wrap up the episode going through the means and motive and opportunity for Billy. And you can kind of see the difference or hear the difference between Mitch and Billy in regards to the means, motive and opportunity. You want to start it out with the means, Alan?
Yeah. One of the first things that jumps out is, as far as the means, is we feel like he had the ability to do it, to kill Judy, as he'd been violent to other females in the past. I mean, we know that for a fact. We've had people tell us, hey, he done this to me. Also, and he lived, like you said, Melissa, a half a mile or less from the Petty farm through the woods. And it was very accessible. You can go on Google Earth and see the paths and the how the fields are laid out and everything else, and how close it is to where Judy actually was found. And he knew the back way in and out of there. Him and Judy knew each other. We talked about him having a crush on her and her sister Cheryl. He may have drove up there to steal something or went over there on a 4-wheeler to steal something. And that's another thing that we talked about with Mr. Petty was some of the stuff that they stole was very large. And I don't care who you are, you're not going to carry it, very far through the woods like that, especially up and down those hills and valleys and all that stuff. It's not going to happen. So, he could have went over there on a 4-wheeler and just surprised her and say, hey, what are you doing? And then he just saw an opportunity for him to assault her or whatever. And then once he done that, he felt like he could, he needed to do something about it, and he killed her and then had to, get rid of the body. So, that's the mean, as far as the means he definitely had the means in several different ways.
Yeah. He had the access and the knowledge and the capability.
Yeah.
So for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that, when Billy had mentioned that Mitch killed Judy and that the Wright brothers helped cover it up and set her on fire, do you think that Billy could do this crime on his own, or do you think he had help?
Oh, I think he could do it on his own. Absolutely. People talked about Billy not being a very big guy, but when your adrenaline's pumping, you can do a lot of stuff. Dragging a body, down a flight of stairs into a cellar. We've talked about that on past episodes. Once you start downhill with that body, the gravity is going to help you out to get her in there. And Jen, you can speak to this, but as far as the body position, the way she was laying, the way they found her, it just tells me that they pulled her down there and just laid her in that position. It wasn't an accidental fall. It wasn't an explosion that knocked her down in there. Somebody placed her in that position.
Yeah, because she's not of course we've talked for hours on end about this, but if she's tripped down the stairs, part of her feet or legs would still be on the stairs.
Exactly.
And as far as my understanding, none of her bones or bone fragments were found on the stairs. They're in that corner. So
yes. And
she's in the corner because someone needed to get back out.
Yeah, you can.
Up the stairs.
You can look at the drawing that the fire investigators made, that were the initial investigators, showed her head being at an angle away from the steps or the stairs, pointed towards the northeast, and her feet were over towards the southwest, right? Close to the stairs, but down inside the room itself. So to me, there's just no way for a trip and a fall for her to end up where she was at. She would be more center of the room and not over at an angle.
Yeah.
So
plus you can't account for the fire starting.
Right.
It's a trip and fall,
right.
So.
I've gone through, that's something else as far as the fire goes. I've gone through any accidental, there was the thought of suicide and all that. I've gone through every scenario in my mind. And for that to happen, the fire had to have been started first.
Yeah.
Because she's not going to shoot herself. She's not going to hang herself. She's not going to do anything else, die, and then a fire start later on. It's just not
correct.
I don't believe that's going to happen that way.
Yeah.
So as far as the means, I think that Billy absolutely had the means and knew the knowledge and everything else on how to do it, where to do it, and all that.
That's true. Yeah. He would know about the cellar.
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely if he'd been on that farm stealing and stuff before, and
sure.
he'd been, he lived there all of his life. He'd been in and out of there before. There's no doubt.
Right. Yeah. And if he walked around at night or ATV'd and the bar closed, there's just, we could put him there more than Mitch.
Yes.
If that makes
absolutely.
sense.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make sense.
And because he can go in and out of, again, everyone said crazy, but very smart, very intelligent, and I think that based on what we've heard and the rape and all these things, he would switch. So he could do the crime and then all of a sudden figure out what he needed to do to try to cover his ass or make it right. If he did do this, so I think he himself could have done it. Now, is it possible that he's told other people besides, this source? Possibly.
Well, and yes. You and I talked about that before too, Melissa, while we were up there, we were discussing all this. He could have told people the day after that he done it, and people were like, that's Billy talking out of his head again.
Yep. You got it.
Yep.
So, people just blew it off. So if you're out there and he did tell you that, let us know.
Yes.
Please let us know.
Or said anything about it.
Yeah, or said anything.
I would even just love to hear what did he say in the couple days afterwards.
Exactly.
And then, Jen, you want to take the motive?
Motive's tough. And you don't have to prove motive in a court of law, but it's pretty difficult to get a conviction on murder or close a case on murder without something about motive. If it was Billy, my top theory is that he was wandering around at night like he was reported to do, saw a light on in the house. There was electricity. Judy would have had to turn a light on, and he got curious and maybe, I don't want to say a peeping Tom, but maybe saw her through a window or whatever, like, oh my gosh, what's she doing up here? Whatever. And then crafts a little plan to get in the house. And from there, it's hard to tell, she could have come upon him stealing, and then that escalated. So there's a couple most likely potential motives, but it's hard to speak to it. I mean, it's hard to speculate, I should say, is the right word, because we just don't know.
And I think our best avenue here is, can we put him there closer than anybody, of opportunity to know that she was up there and come upon her. And he often had hallucinations and paranoia. So, is it possible he came upon Judy and he thought that she was somebody else, right? Or that he had told our source that, quote, she knew too much. So when she knows too much, what does that even mean? I don't think Judy knew anything.
Yeah, when we heard that.
In his head, was it the aliens coming? Where was his state of mind at that point?
Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
So, the last thing that we're getting to is the opportunity. So, as we mentioned earlier, the bar closed early on that night that she died. So Billy would have, had to go home, and maybe he wasn't ready to stop drinking. He did stay and drink at the bar almost regularly. So he could have said, I'm not done yet, decided to go walk at night, which he did, or drive his ATV through the paths. And then, of course, came upon Judy, like Jen said. And Judy was alone at the farm without any cell phone or any way to get a hold of anybody for any kind of help. The other big thing here that we talked about a little bit is that Judy may not have been in a typical state of mind due to her low blood sugar and the walk. She just walked, 10 miles, 11 miles. Mm-hmm. So this, again, made her probably feel very weak, very maybe she's hungry. Her blood sugar's down. There's no real food, or drinks there at the house, water. She could have drank the water, but I heard not to drink the water in Parkersburg. So I don't know. I don't think she'd want to do that.
Just drink the beer or what?
Yeah. Well, we had experience with the water down there. I heard it's not well.
With regards to opportunity, that opportunity also encompasses, did the person have the time to do this where they weren't expected to be somewhere? So I don't know if Billy really had a job aside from the auction house thing, but obviously he didn't have a job where he had to be at that night, right? He wasn't expected to clock in somewhere.
Everything.
He didn't make plans with friends where if he didn't show up, someone would think it was weird. No one's out checking on him. So that also gave him the opportunity to do this. Plus he had the knowledge that no one else is going to show up on that property while whatever's going on. He's not going to get caught.
Right. And from everything that we've heard from anybody, that's all he did was run the auction house. And, buying and selling junk, stealing and selling junk. I mean,
and he could barely even do that. He couldn't function. I mean, he would have to go home, and the, auctioneer would have to finish it because he just got so, high. He had to leave. Yeah. So that's a good point. He didn't have anywhere to be.
No.
And, I think he had the ability to be like, okay, now I've got to, what I heard was he would then be able to say, I've got to get myself out of this now, and have really no remorse about doing it. So, Alan, I want to know from you too, how or why did Judy end up in the cellar and not burned in the house? I know that we've all kind of talked about that. And while we were there, I'll go first, I guess. One of the thoughts that I had was, because the altercation, whatever happened outside, not in the house. And so, again, we're just trying to play through scenarios of how this would happen if it was Billy or Mitch or somebody else, if the lights are on because she made it up there, which we believe she did, turned on the lights, getting herself settled. There were beds there in the house and blankets and things like that she could spend the night. And, someone comes upon her. If we're saying, let's play the scenario, Billy, Billy would be curious, why is somebody in the petty house, right? That's odd. And the lights are on. So he goes to the door, knocks on the door. course, Judy comes, but she's not going to let him in. Maybe she steps out.
Yeah.
And closes the door and starts walking and trying to walk him off. She's going to be nice to him. Maybe, like you said, Jen, maybe he offered to bring her food or have her come, go with him to her house, to his house and get food.
Sure.
Any of those things could have happened. And then he could have expected more or wanted more and had a crush on her. And then it went sideways from there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I believe she was burned in the cellar because that was the easiest place based on where the crime happened. You're not going to try to bring her back into the house.
I agree. And, you and I talked about that the other day. I could even go as far to say that the whole thing may have started in the house. If he went in and maybe a fight or something like that started and she run and tried to get away from him and fell, or maybe whoever it was shot her in the back or something like that, trying to get away. And I think that the actual physical murder of itself, whatever happened outside the house, close to the cellar. And, again, this was a spur of the moment. They just pulled her down in that cellar and somehow lit it on fire and went that far. But I don't see this being a long thought out murder, like you hear on TV shows and stuff, or like a serial killer type thing. It's not. This was a crime of opportunity that happened on a spur of the moment, and even the fire was a crime of opportunity that happened on a spur of the moment. And like we talked about, Billy was smart enough to carry all this stuff out. And again, not saying that he did it. I'm not. He may have called for help or something. I don't know, but I really don't think so. I think he done it. I think if he done it by himself, right there, and it just happened really, really quick.
Yeah.
And even without like a gun or anything like that, there are tons of stuff out there that you could use to, let's say, hit somebody in the head.
Yeah.
We talked about this, that her skull was fragment. I mean, there was in pieces.
Yeah.
So
Which the fire,
if there's a brick, if there's a rock.
Yeah, the fire could have done part of that, but something, I mean, like you said, there's plenty of things laying around out there that it could have done it. Rock or brick, a piece of metal pipe or anything, and then her skull was already fractured and fragmented, and they pulled her down the stairs and then burned her, and then we found the fragments from it, which to me kind of makes sense, because other bones that were still there intact that weren't fractured like the skull was. So it's very possible, that's something that happened.
For sure.
Yeah.
And blunt force trauma is often a result of a spur of the moment.
Yeah, and that's
situation that escalates because you're not ready for it.
That's exactly what I was fixing to say. Blunt force trauma to the head or something like that is always a spur of the moment crime, an opportunity. So
yeah,
I agree. And she could have had a weapon herself of grabbing something to try to defend herself, and that was used.
Yeah.
So. All right. So what's next, right? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm sure our listeners are like overwhelmed, like, holy moly. Welcome to our world in the last 2 months. It has been
a whirlwind,
nonstop. Yes. And it continues to be a whirlwind. We are getting information from people. Again, you can Facebook message me. You can email me. You can stay anonymous. We have a $7,500 reward. Tax-free.
Yep.
If it leads to an arrest, well, given that some people in our case that we're looking at are dead, if we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and use a different, what's it called, Alan?
Exceptional circumstantial evidence to close a case.
Yes.
If
exceptional
the information a person brings
closed exceptionally or exceptional circumstances. So that's what we were talking about earlier. So
if that occurs, someone brings forth the information that results in the case being officially closed, we'll discuss the reward situation and probably pay it out. So, It's not something that we thought about when we first set up the reward fund, but we'll definitely talk about it.
Yeah.
So,
who would have thought weey'd get here?
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, exactly.
You know what?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So what is next? Of course. So our next episode that we're going to record next week that'll drop is our trip to actually Parkersburg. So Ellen and I made the trip to Parkersburg last weekend, and we did a lot of awesome things there, boots on the ground, as Jen says, and we made a lot of stops at people's houses to get information, and people slammed the doors in our face. We didn't get a lot of cooperation, and we'll tell you who they were and why, and even play some recordings that we have. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we're putting this information out there because, again, if you have any information about Mitchell Wright, about the Wright family, about Billy Schreckengoss, the Schreckengoss family, or anyone else, you know, anyone else that you have heard things or have said things or rumors, let us know, because then we will add that to our list and keep tracking people down.
Exactly.
Yep.
And there might be a few critics out there like, oh, you guys are being too harsh, or how dare you say who slammed the door in your face? No, if this was your loved one who was murdered and cremated, essentially, you would want a team just like this working your loved one's case. And we have, well, it's, you know, Melissa, Alan, Justin, mostly, but like the team has played very nice for a very long time and given everybody the opportunity to talk anonymously. And if you want to ignore the team or not cooperate, then guess what? You may get called out. So sorry, not sorry, because this is about a murder case and it's extremely serious that we get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, so we'll definitely go through that. And, you know, we gave people opportunities to talk and actually gave them opportunities to help prove that their loved one had nothing to do with this murder, and they refused to talk. So, you know, that's interesting to me, but I won't get into all that now because there's so much more to go with that. But
next time,
thank you all for listening. What?
I said next time.
Next time on Safe Haven, who slammed the doors?
Yep.
It's a cliffhanger.
And so,
yep.
as we go look for more ticks. So thank you all for listening again. We'll be back next week with another new episode. And again, you can find us on Facebook, you know, Safe Haven, the Unsolved Murder of Judith Petty. Please make sure to share the podcast and our Facebook, because you never know who knows something. And I guess we'll see you all next week.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys. It's been great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.